I never told my daughter about the $65,000 I earned each month. For 23 years, she watched me clip coupons, buy secondhand clothes, and drive a 15-year-old sedan. She thought I was just getting by, barely making ends meet, as a bookkeeper or administrative assistant. Something forgettable, something small. And I let her believe it. My name is Catherine Walsh, and I'm 58 years old. I'm the Chief Financial Officer of a technology conglomerate that operates across 12 countries. I approve budgets that exceed the GDP of small nations. I negotiate with billionaires, governments, and investment firms. My signature authorizes transactions worth hundreds of millions. But my daughter, Rebecca, never knew any of this. Why would I tell her? I grew up in a generation where showing off was considered vulgar, where real class meant silence, where true power whispered instead of shouted. My own mother raised me in a one-bedroom apartment after my father left. She worked 3 jobs to keep me fed and in school. She taught me that dignity doesn't require an audience, that wealth is what you save, not what you display. So, when I started climbing the corporate ladder in my 30s, when my salary began adding zeros, when headhunters called with offers that would make most people dizzy, I kept living exactly as I had before. Same modest townhouse in a middle-class neighborhood, same furniture from discount stores, same habits of frugality that had been carved into my bones by necessity and later chosen by wisdom. I invested aggressively, built a portfolio that would sustain 3 generations, and lived on a fraction of what I earned. My colleagues assumed I was eccentric. My neighbors thought I was just another struggling single mother. And Rebecca, my beautiful, ambitious daughter, grew up thinking her mother was barely surviving, always one emergency away from financial disaster. The call came on a Tuesday morning in March. I was in my home office, reviewing quarterly projections when Rebecca's voice came through the phone with that particular brightness that meant she wanted something. "Mom, hi, do you have a minute?" "Of course, sweetheart. What's going on?" "So, Daniel's parents are flying in from California this weekend. They want to meet you. We were thinking we could all have brunch together on Sunday. Somewhere nice. They're treating." Daniel was Rebecca's fiancé of 6 months. A software engineer, well-educated, from what she'd told me, a good man. I'd met him twice, briefly, and he seemed kind enough, if a bit reserved. "That sounds lovely," I said carefully. "Where were you thinking?" "The Greenhouse. It's this beautiful place downtown, very upscale. Daniel's parents suggested it. They want to, get to know you properly." Something in her tone made my instincts sharpen. It wasn't excitement. It was nervousness, maybe even anxiety. "Rebecca, is everything all right?" "Yes, of course. It's just, Mom, I need to tell you something. Please don't be upset." I set down my pen. "I'm listening." "Daniel's parents they're kind of formal. They care about appearances, status, that sort of thing. And I might have told them that we don't have much, that you work a basic office job, that money has always been tight." The words hung in the air. I felt something cold settle in my chest. "I see." "I didn't mean anything by it," Rebecca rushed on. "It's just, they kept asking questions about family background, and I didn't want them to think I was making up stories or exaggerating. So I told them the truth as I know it, that you raised me alone, that you worked hard, that we lived simply." "That is the truth," I said quietly. "I know, but Mom, they're very wealthy, like really wealthy. And sometimes they can be a little judgmental about people who aren't at their level. I just don't want this brunch to be uncomfortable." "Are you asking me not to come?" "No, God, no. I want you there. I need you there. I'm just warning you that they might be a bit much. They might make comments. They might act superior. I just want you to be prepared." I took a deep breath. In that moment, a decision crystallized. If Rebecca thought I was poor, if Daniel's parents were coming prepared to look down on me, then I would give them exactly what they expected. I would play the role of the struggling single mother so thoroughly, so convincingly, that they would reveal their true characters without any filter, any politeness, any pretense. Don't worry, sweetheart. I'll be there. And I'll be myself. Thank you, Mom. I love you. I love you too. After I hung up, I sat in my office for a long time looking at the framed degrees on my wall. MBA from Columbia, CPA certification, CFO of the Year Award from the Financial Executives Association, letters of commendation from Fortune 500 CEOs. None of it visible from outside this room. None of it part of the story my daughter knew. I opened my closet and looked at my clothes. Most were practical, purchased during end-of-season sales, worn until they fell apart, but in the back, behind everything else, hung the wardrobe I wore to board meetings and investor conferences. Tailored suits that cost more than most people's monthly rent, designer shoes, jewelry that stayed locked in a safe except for corporate events. For this brunch, I would need neither. I would need the oldest, most worn-down version of myself I could create. Sunday morning arrived with gray skies and a light drizzle. Perfect, pathetic fallacy for what I was about to do. I dressed in a shapeless floral dress that I'd owned for 15 years, originally purchased for $7 at a thrift store. Flat shoes with worn heels, a threadbare cardigan with a small hole near the hem that I had never bothered to mend. No jewelry, except a cheap watch with a leather band that had cracked with age. I pulled my gray-striped hair back in a simple ponytail. No makeup, except for a touch of drugstore lipstick. I looked in the mirror and saw exactly what I intended. A woman life had worn down. Someone who'd worked hard and had little to show for it. Someone invisible. Someone easy to dismiss. I drove my old sedan across town, the engine rattling slightly, the passenger window stuck half open because I had never fixed the motor. I could have driven any of the 3 newer cars I kept in a storage facility across town. But this one fit the narrative. This one told the right story. The greenhouse was everything Rebecca had implied. Soaring glass ceilings, cascading plants, marble floors, tables set with multiple pieces of silverware. The kind of place where the menu doesn't list prices, where the waiters speak in hushed tones, where everyone seems to be performing wealth rather than simply living it. I gave my name to the hostess, who looked me up and down with barely concealed disdain before leading me through the restaurant. I could see her assessing my clothes, my shoes, my overall appearance, and finding me wanting. Good. Let her judge. Let them all judge. Rebecca was already at the table, looking radiant in a navy dress that I recognized as expensive, probably purchased by Daniel. She stood when she saw me, her smile a little too bright, a little too nervous. "Mom, hi." We hugged, and I felt her tension in the tight grip of her hands. "Wouldn't miss it," I said. Daniel stood as well, polite, as always, in a crisp white shirt and slacks. "Mrs. Walsh, good to see you again. Please, call me Catherine." And then I turned to the 2 people seated at the table, watching me with expressions I'd learned to read over decades in corporate boardrooms. Judgment, assessment, dismissal. Daniel's father, Richard Morrison, was in his early 60s, silver-haired, wearing a suit that probably cost $5,000. His watch was a Patek Philippe, his cufflinks platinum. Everything about him screamed old money and the arrogance that came with it. His wife, Charlene, was immaculate. Her blonde hair was styled in a perfect bob, her jewelry tasteful but clearly expensive, her dress a shade of cream that would show any stain, which meant she never did anything that might cause one. She extended her hand to me like a queen offering her ring to be kissed. "You must be Catherine," she said, her voice cultured, practiced. Her handshake was limp, brief, as if prolonged contact might contaminate her. "Lovely to meet you both," I said, making my voice smaller, uncertain. "Thank you for inviting me." "Of course," Richard said, though his eyes had already completed their assessment and moved on as if I was a piece of furniture, noted and dismissed. "Please, sit." I took the chair furthest from them, at the end of the table, in the position usually reserved for the least important guest. No one suggested I move closer. No one pulled out my chair. I sat down and folded my hands in my lap, playing the role of someone who didn't quite belong, someone grateful to be included at all. The waiter appeared, young and handsome, distributing menus that were bound in leather. I opened mine and looked at entries written in what seemed to be a combination of French and pretension. Herb-crusted this, pan-seared that. Everything described in a way that made me smile internally. In corporate dining, I'd eaten at 3 Michelin-star restaurants where the chefs knew me by name. This was amateur hour by comparison. "Do you need help with the menu?" Charlene asked, her tone dripping with false kindness. "Some of the items can be a bit sophisticated." "Yes, please," I said, making myself sound helpless. "I'm not familiar with these types of places." Charlene smiled, and I saw the satisfaction in her eyes. This was what she'd expected. This was what she'd wanted. "Well, let's see. Perhaps the salad. It's quite good. Light, simple, nothing too expensive." "That sounds perfect," I agreed. Richard ordered wine, a bottle I recognized as costing at least $400. When the sommelier poured samples for him to taste, he swirled it dramatically, sniffed it with exaggerated appreciation, and pronounced it acceptable, as if he were doing the restaurant a favor. "This is from a small vineyard in Burgundy," he announced to the table. "Very exclusive, very rare. I have connections there, of course. They don't sell to just anyone." "How wonderful," I murmured. Charlene turned her attention to me fully for the first time. "So, Catherine, Rebecca tells us you work in an office." "Yes, I do some bookkeeping, administrative work, nothing very interesting." "How modest," Charlene said, though her expression suggested modesty was not what she was thinking. "And you've done that for many years?" "Most of my life." "It must have been difficult. Raising Rebecca alone, a single mother, limited income. I can't imagine the sacrifices you had to make." There it was, the first blade, disguised as sympathy. "We managed," I said quietly. "Rebecca never went without the important things." "Of course not," Richard interjected. "She's turned out wonderfully. Credit to her own ambition, I'm sure. Some people rise above their circumstances." The implication was clear. Rebecca had succeeded despite me, not because of me. Daniel shifted uncomfortably. Rebecca stared at her napkin. Neither of them said anything. The food arrived. My simple salad, their elaborate entrees with artistic presentations and descriptions delivered with reverence by the waiter. Charlene cut her fish with surgical precision, each movement deliberate, practiced. "You know, Catherine, Richard and I believe very strongly in family, in supporting the next generation. That's why we've been so generous with Daniel and Rebecca." "That's very kind of you." "We gave them $50,000 for their down payment on the condo. Prime location. Investment property, really. It'll triple in value within 10 years. "How generous," I repeated. "And we'll be paying for the wedding, of course. We've booked the Whitmore estate for next June. Do you know it?" "No, probably not.
It's where senators and CEOs have their events. We're expecting 300 guests. The budget is running about 200,000, but one can't put a price on perfection. I nodded, playing the impressed provincial. And we've set up trust funds for future grandchildren, $1 million per child. We want to ensure they have every advantage: private schools, international travel, the best universities. These things matter. Education is important, I agreed softly. Which brings us to an important topic, Charlene said, setting down her fork and turning to face me directly. Catherine, we need to discuss your role in Rebecca and Daniel's life going forward. Something in her tone made Rebecca's eyes widen. Mom, maybe we should— Let me finish, dear, Charlene interrupted smoothly. Catherine, we know you love Rebecca. That's not in question. But we also know that your financial situation is limited. And we don't want Rebecca and Daniel to feel obligated to support you. They're starting their lives together. They need freedom, not burdens. The word hung in the air like poison. Burdens. I would never want to be a burden, I said, my voice deliberately small. Of course not, Richard said, but these things happen. Adult children feel responsible for aging parents, especially when those parents are struggling. It's natural, but it's also a strain on a young marriage. We've discussed this, and we have a proposal. We'd like to offer you a monthly stipend. Nothing extravagant, you understand, but enough to make your life more comfortable. Perhaps $800 a month. That should help with expenses. I let the silence grow. Rebecca looked like she wanted to disappear into her chair. Daniel was studying his plate as if it held the secrets of the universe. That's very generous of you, I said finally. But I don't understand. Why would you do that? Because we want Rebecca to be happy, Charlene said. And we want her to be free to live her life without worrying about you. In exchange, we'd simply ask that you respect their space. Don't call too often. Don't create drama or needs that pull them away from their responsibilities. Let them build their life without interference. There it was, the offer, the bribe, $800 a month to disappear from my daughter's life. I looked at Rebecca. She was crying silently, tears running down her cheeks, but she said nothing. She didn't defend me. She didn't protest. She just sat there, paralyzed by her own cowardice or her own complicity. I wasn't sure which. That's quite an offer, I said slowly. $800 a month. That's almost $10,000 a year. Exactly, Richard said, smiling as if he'd just solved a problem. A generous supplement to your modest income. I folded my hands on the table. The moment had come. I could feel it in my bones, in the way the air seemed to thicken, in the way time seemed to slow. I have a question, I said, my voice still soft, still playing the role. This monthly stipend of $800, is that based on what you think I'm worth or what you think you can afford? Charlene blinked. I'm not sure I understand. Let me clarify. And now my voice began to change, began to shed the uncertainty, the timidity, the smallness. You've offered me $800 a month to stay out of my daughter's life. I'm curious about the calculation. Did you assess my financial needs? Did you research market rates for parental alienation? Or did you just pick a number that seemed large enough to impress me, but small enough not to matter to you? Richard frowned. Catherine, I think you're misunderstanding our intentions. Am I? Then please explain your intentions. Because from where I'm sitting, it sounds like you're trying to buy me off, to pay me to disappear, to eliminate the embarrassment of a poor mother-in-law from your carefully curated life. That's not what we're doing at all, Charlene protested, but her face had gone pale. Then what are you doing? I pressed. You've spent this entire brunch talking about money. How much you spent on the down payment, how much you're spending on the wedding, how much you've put in trust funds. You've itemized your generosity like a balance sheet. And then you looked at me, assessed my worth based on my clothes and my job, and decided I was worth $800 a month, less than you probably spend on your country club membership. Mom, please, Rebecca whispered. No, Rebecca, not this time. I've been quiet long enough. I turned back to Charlene and Richard. You want to talk about money? Let's talk about money. Real money. Not your performative wealth. Not your status symbols. Not your designer clothes and exclusive vineyard connections. Let's talk about actual financial literacy. I don't think this is appropriate, Richard said stiffly. Appropriate? I laughed, and it wasn't a nice sound. You thought it was appropriate to offer me money to abandon my daughter. You thought it was appropriate to call me a burden. You thought it was appropriate to measure my worth in dollars and cents. But now that I'm responding, suddenly it's inappropriate? The waiter approached tentatively, sensed the tension, and quickly retreated. Catherine, you're upset,
Charlene said. We understand, but you're overreacting. Am I? Let me ask you something else. Richard, what do you do for a living? He straightened in his chair. I'm a commercial real estate developer. And that's lucrative? Very. Good for you. Self-made? I built my company from the ground up. Impressive. And Charlene, what about you? She lifted her chin. I manage our family's investments. I oversee our portfolio, our properties. I'm very involved in our financial planning. So you both understand money. You understand value. You understand investments. Of course, Richard said. Then you'll appreciate this. I reached into my worn purse and pulled out my phone. I opened my banking app, the one connected to my primary investment account, and turned the screen toward them. This is one of my accounts. Just one. Take a look at that number. They leaned forward, both of them. Their eyes widened as they processed what they were seeing. That can't be right, Charlene whispered. $12 million, I said calmly. This is my liquid investment account. It doesn't include my retirement funds, my real estate holdings, my stock options, or my deferred compensation, just my accessible investments. Rebecca's mouth had fallen open. Daniel looked like he'd been struck by lightning. But you said you were a bookkeeper, Richard managed. No, I corrected. You asked if I worked in an office, and I said I did administrative work. I never said I was a bookkeeper. You assumed that based on my appearance, based on your prejudices, based on what you wanted to believe. Then what do you do? Charlene asked, her voice barely audible. I pulled out my business card, the one I kept for formal occasions, and slid it across the table. Heavy cardstock, embossed lettering. Catherine Walsh, Chief Financial Officer, Nexus Global Technologies. The silence was absolute, deafening. I earned $65,000 per month, not including bonuses, which typically add another $1 million annually. I've been with the company for 23 years, starting as an analyst and working my way up. I manage a finance department of 200 people. I report directly to the CEO. I sit on the board of directors. I've been profiled in Forbes, Fortune, and the Wall Street Journal. Richard had gone gray. Charlene looked like she might be sick. But why? Daniel started, then couldn't finish. Why do I live the way I do? I finished for him. Why do I drive an old car, wear old clothes, live in a modest house? Because I learned a long time ago that wealth isn't about displaying what you have, it's about having the freedom to do what you want. I don't need to prove anything to anyone. I don't need designer labels to feel valuable. I don't need expensive restaurants to enjoy a meal. I have wealth, real wealth, the kind that doesn't require an audience. Rebecca, Charlene turned to my daughter, did you know about this? Rebecca shook her head, tears streaming down her face. No, I had no idea. Mom, why didn't you tell me? Because I wanted you to grow up normal, I said gently. I wanted you to work hard, to value education, to understand that money had to be earned. I didn't want you to become entitled. I didn't want you to grow up thinking you were better than others because of a bank account. And I think I succeeded. You're kind, hardworking, humble. You're everything I hoped you'd be. But all this time, Rebecca sobbed, I worried about you. I worried about your retirement, your medical bills, whether you'd be okay. I know. And that worry taught you compassion. It taught you to care about others, to think beyond yourself. Those are lessons that money can't buy. I turned back to Charlene and Richard, who looked like they'd aged 10 years in the last 5 minutes. Now, let's return to your generous offer, $800 a month to stay out of my daughter's life. I'm going to make you a counter offer. Catherine, please, Richard said. We didn't know. Quiet. You had your turn to talk. Now it's mine. I leaned forward. I'll give you $1 million, cash, right now. If you can tell me one time, just one time, when you treated someone kindly who couldn't benefit you, one time when you showed compassion to someone poor, someone struggling, someone who couldn't advance your social status or your business interests, one time you valued a person for who they were, not what they had. They stared at me. Charlene's mouth opened, closed. Richard looked away. That's what I thought, I said. You can't, because you've never done it. You've spent your entire lives measuring people by their bank accounts, their zip codes, their ability to enhance your image. You've perfected the art of looking down on others. And today, you thought you'd found another victim, the poor single mother, the struggling bookkeeper, someone you could pity and dismiss and buy off. We're not bad people, Charlene said weakly. Aren't you? You tried to pay me to abandon my daughter? You called me a burden. You spent this entire meal making subtle comments about my clothes, my job, my worth. You've performed your superiority like it was an Olympic sport. If that's not bad, it's certainly not good. I stood up. Everyone at the table looked up at me. Here's what's going to happen, I said. Rebecca and Daniel are going to get married, with or without your financial support. They're going to build a life based on their own values, their own choices, their own hard work. And I'm going to be part of that life because I'm her mother, and no amount of money changes that. And what about us? Richard asked quietly. That depends on you. You can accept that you were wrong. You can apologize genuinely. You can learn that people have value beyond their net worth. Or you can continue being exactly who you are, and my daughter and her husband can decide how much space you deserve in their lives. I pulled out my wallet and took out a black credit card, one that even Richard probably recognized, an invitation-only Centurion card. I dropped it on the table. The bill is on me, including the $400 wine you ordered to show off. Consider it a gift from the poor woman you tried to bribe. Charlene picked up the card with trembling fingers. Catherine, we're sorry. We truly are. Are you? Are you sorry for what you did, or sorry that you got caught? Sorry that the poor woman turned out to be richer than you? Because there's a big difference.
She didn't answer. Neither did Richard. I looked at Rebecca. Sweetheart, I'll wait for you outside. Take your time. Say what you need to say. Mom, I'm coming with you, Rebecca said, standing abruptly. I've heard enough. Rebecca, sit down, Charlene commanded. No. My daughter's voice was stronger than I'd ever heard it. No, I'm not going to sit down. I'm not going to listen to you insult my mother anymore. I'm not going to watch you treat people like commodities. I'm done. She grabbed her purse and came around the table to me. I'm so sorry, Mom, she whispered. I'm so sorry. We'll talk later, I said. Let's just go. Daniel stood as well. I'm going too. Daniel, if you walk out of here, Richard started. You'll what? Cut me off? Disinherit me? Go ahead. I don't need your money if it comes with this much toxicity. I'd rather build something with Rebecca on our own than be owned by you. We walked out together, the three of us, leaving Charlene and Richard sitting at that table in that expensive restaurant surrounded by their wealth and their emptiness. Outside, the rain had stopped. The air smelled clean, fresh, new. Rebecca hugged me tightly, sobbing into my shoulder. I can't believe I didn't know. I can't believe you never told me. I know this is a shock, I said, stroking her hair, and we have a lot to talk about. But right now, just know that I love you. I've always loved you. And everything I did because I wanted you to become who you are, not who my money might have made you. I don't care about the money, Rebecca said. I care that you had to sit through that I didn't defend you, that I let them treat you that way. You were scared, I said. You were caught between your mother and your future in-laws. I understand that, but you stood up when it mattered. You left with me. That's what I'll remember. Daniel stood awkwardly nearby, looking shell-shocked. Mrs. Walsh? Catherine? I don't know what to say. Say you'll take care of my daughter, I replied. Say you'll build a life based on respect and honesty. Say you'll learn from this and never treat anyone the way your parents treated me. I promise, he said fervently. All of that, I promise. My phone rang. I glanced at the screen. My assistant, calling about an urgent board matter. The real world calling me back to who I actually was. I need to take this. Rebecca, can we have dinner this week? Just the two of us. We have a lot to talk about. Yes, please. I want to know everything. Who you really are. What your life is like. All of it. You will, I promised. But sweetie, I'm still the same person. Same mother who raised you. Same person who made you lunch and helped with homework. The only thing that's different is now you know the whole story. I answered the call and walked toward my car, falling naturally into the professional tone I used for business. Behind me, I heard Rebecca explaining something to Daniel, their voices overlapping, trying to process what had just happened. As I drove home, I felt a weight lifting that I hadn't even realized I'd been carrying. The weight of pretense, of hiding, of allowing others to underestimate me. I lived small deliberately, strategically, but there was freedom in finally being seen. That evening, I changed into comfortable clothes and sat in my home office, surrounded by the reality of my life. The awards, the degrees, the photographs with presidents and CEOs. This was me. Both versions. The woman in the old dress and the woman who made million-dollar decisions. They weren't contradictory. They were complementary. My phone buzzed with a text from Rebecca. Mom, I've been thinking about everything. Can I ask you something? Were you testing us? Were you waiting to see how Daniel's parents would treat you? I considered my response carefully before typing, No, I've lived this way for decades, but I also wasn't going to correct their assumptions. I wanted to see who they really were, and they showed me. They were horrible. They were honest. Finally. Most people hide their prejudices better. In a way, their openness was a gift. Now you know exactly who they are. Daniel and I have been talking. We're going to tell them we won't be accepting any more money. We want to do this on our own. That's your choice to make. But Rebecca, don't punish them with poverty. Accept help if it's offered freely, without strings. Just don't let money become the foundation of your relationship with them or with each other. When did you get so wise? When I stopped caring what anyone else thought of me. 3 days later, Rebecca came to my house for the dinner we'd planned. I made pasta, simple and delicious, at the same worn table where I'd fed her throughout her childhood. But this time, we talked differently, openly, honestly. Tell me about your job. Really tell me. What's a day in your life like? So I told her about the executive meetings, the crisis management, the international travel, the high-stakes negotiations, about the pressure and the responsibility and the satisfaction of doing something I was genuinely good at. Do you love it? She asked. Most days. Some days I'm just tired. But overall, yeah, I love it. I love the challenge. I love building something. I love mentoring younger employees. I love knowing that my decisions matter. I can't believe you've been doing this my whole life and I never knew. You weren't supposed to know. You were supposed to be a kid, to grow up without that pressure. But didn't you want me to be proud of you? I reached across the table and took her hand. Sweetheart, I didn't need you to be proud of my job. I needed you to be proud of who I was as a person, as your mother. The rest was just what I did for work. She cried then, the kind of deep, cleansing tears that come from releasing years of misunderstanding. I worried about you so much. I worried you were lonely, that you were struggling, that you needed help but were too proud to ask. I was lonely sometimes, I admitted. Single parenthood is hard regardless of your income. But I was never struggling financially, and I'm not too proud to ask for help. I just didn't need that kind of help. What about Daniel's parents? She asked. Do you think they'll ever apologize? Really apologize? I don't know. Some people change. Some people can't. They've lived their entire lives believing that wealth equals worth. Confronting that belief means confronting everything they've built their identity on. That's hard work. Most people aren't willing to do it. Daniel called his dad yesterday, told him we wouldn't be accepting any more money. His dad said we were being immature and emotional, that we'd regret this when we're struggling to pay bills. And how did Daniel respond? He said we'd rather struggle on our own terms than be comfortable on theirs. I smiled. He's a good man. Because of you, Rebecca said. If you hadn't done what you did at that brunch, I would have married into that family without really seeing them. I would have spent years letting them make subtle comments, letting them control us with money, letting them treat people like you treated me, with conditions. They love Daniel, in their way. They just don't know how to love without controlling. That's not love. That's ownership. You're right, and you're wise to recognize the difference. We talked late into the night, filling in years of gaps, rewriting the story of my life that she'd held in her head. When she finally left, hugging me tightly at the door, she said something that made everything worth it. Thank you for teaching me that what we have doesn't define who we are. I'm going to remember that always, and I'm going to teach it to my children. The wedding happened 6 months later, not at the Whitmore estate, at a small vineyard outside the city, surrounded by 200 friends and family. Simple, beautiful, meaningful. Richard and Charlene came. They were polite, distant, clearly uncomfortable. They'd sent a check for $50,000 for the wedding, which Rebecca and Daniel had donated to a women's shelter in my name. That gesture probably hurt more than anything I'd said in the restaurant. During the reception, Charlene approached me at the bar. She looked older than she had at the brunch,
as if the revelation had aged her. "Catherine, may I speak with you?" "Of course."
We moved to a quiet corner. She held her wine glass like a shield. "I want to apologize," she said. "Richard and I talked a lot after that day about what we said, how we acted, what we revealed about ourselves. And you were right about all of it. We've spent our lives measuring people by their bank accounts. We've treated wealth as virtue and poverty as failure. We judged you without knowing anything about you. And we were cruel." "Yes, you were." "I don't know if we can change," she said quietly. "These attitudes, they're so deeply ingrained. But we're trying. We've started volunteering at a food bank. Richard has mentored 3 young entrepreneurs from disadvantaged backgrounds. We're trying to see people differently." "That's good," I said. "Change is hard. Recognizing you need to change is even harder. Can you forgive us?" I looked at this woman who'd tried to buy me off, who'd called me a burden, who'd measured my worth in hundreds of dollars per month. I thought about forgiveness, about what it meant, about what it required. "Forgiveness isn't something I can just hand you," I said. "It's earned through consistent action, through genuine change, through proving over time that you've learned something. Ask me again in a year. Show me through your actions that you're different people. Then maybe we can talk about forgiveness." She nodded, tears in her eyes. "That's fair. More than fair. Charlene, can I tell you something? Please." The saddest part of that brunch wasn't how you treated me. It was that you thought your behavior was normal, that you believed offering money gave you the right to control others, that you saw kindness and respect as transactional. You have everything money can buy, but you're missing what matters most. What's that? The ability to see people, really see them. Not their clothes, not their jobs, not their bank accounts, just their humanity. That's free, and yet it's the one thing money can never buy. Charlene wiped her eyes carefully, preserving her makeup. "I'm beginning to understand that." "Good. That's a start." She walked away, back to Richard, who stood awkwardly by the wall, clearly not knowing what to do with himself in a setting where his wealth couldn't pave the way. Rebecca found me a few minutes later, glowing in her simple but elegant wedding dress. "What were you and Charlene talking about?" "Apologies and second chances." "Are you giving them a second chance?" "I'm giving them the opportunity to earn one. That's all anyone can ask for." Rebecca hugged me. "You're incredible, you know that." "I'm just old enough to know that holding grudges is exhausting. Letting people prove they can change is easier than carrying anger forever." "When did you become so wise?" "About 30 decades of watching people self-destruct taught me a lot." The DJ announced the mother-daughter dance. Rebecca took my hand and led me to the dance floor. As we swayed to the music, surrounded by people celebrating love and commitment, I felt complete. "Mom," Rebecca said softly, "can I ask you something?" "Anything." "Do you regret it? Hiding who you were for so long?" I thought about it honestly. No. Because it taught you something money never could. It taught you empathy. It taught you to work hard without a safety net. It taught you that your worth isn't in your bank account. Those lessons shaped who you became, and I love who you became. But weren't you lonely? Didn't you want someone to share your success with? I shared it with you, just quietly. Every opportunity I gave you, every door I opened without you knowing, every safety net I built invisibly beneath you, That was sharing it. You got into that private high school because I made a donation they never told you about. You got that internship because I called in a favor. Your study abroad program? I funded a scholarship that you won based on merit, but I made sure the scholarship existed. Rebecca stopped dancing. What? I was always there, sweetheart. I just didn't need credit for it. I didn't need you to know. I needed you to feel like you earned everything yourself. Because you did. Mostly. I just made sure the opportunities existed. I don't know whether to be angry or grateful. Be neither. Just understand that wealth gives you options. The option to help secretly. The option to open doors quietly. The option to support without controlling. That's how I chose to use mine. That's how I want to use mine. With purpose, with discretion, with generosity that doesn't require recognition. Then I did something right. The song ended. We hugged on the dance floor, and I felt tears on my cheeks. Happy tears, relieved tears, the tears of a mother who'd taken an enormous risk and watched it pay off. The months that followed brought changes. Rebecca and Daniel bought a modest starter home, insisting on making their own way. Richard and Charlene kept their distance, occasionally sending stilted emails about their volunteer work, their attempts to change. I responded politely, but without warmth. Trust had to be rebuilt brick by brick. My own life continued its quiet routine. I went to work, made decisions worth millions, came home to my simple townhouse, and cooked dinner for one. But now Rebecca visited regularly. We had honest conversations about money, about choices, about the weight of wealth and the freedom of living authentically. "Do you think you'll ever move?" she asked one evening as we shared pasta at my kitchen table. "Get a bigger house? Drive a nice car?" "Why would I?" "Because you can afford it." That's never been the question. The question is, do I need it? Will it make me happier? Will it bring me peace? And the answer to all of those is no. But don't you ever want to enjoy your money? I do enjoy it. I enjoy the security. I enjoy the freedom to quit my job tomorrow if I wanted to. I enjoy knowing that if you needed help, real help, I could provide it. I enjoy the charitable donations I make anonymously. I enjoy that none of my neighbors know who I am, so they treat me like a normal person. That's enjoyment. The rest is just spending for the sake of spending. "You're going to leave me a fortune I don't know how to handle," Rebecca said, half joking, half serious. "You'll figure it out, and I'm going to start teaching you now. Not about investment strategies or tax shelters, but about the responsibility that comes with wealth, about using it wisely, about staying grounded when you have the resources to float away." So I began teaching her. We met monthly to discuss my finances, my investments, my philosophy. I introduced her to my financial advisors, my attorneys, my accountants. I showed her the charitable trusts I'd established, the scholarships I funded, the causes I supported. "Why did you keep all of this secret?" she asked, reviewing documents in my home office. "Because the moment you tell people you have money, everything changes. They treat you differently. They want things from you. They resent you, or they idealize you. Either way, you stop being a person and become a symbol. I didn't want that. But wasn't it exhausting? Pretending all the time?" "I wasn't pretending. This is who I am. I just let people assume things about my financial situation because it was easier to correct them. The woman you knew growing up was real.
She just happened to have a very healthy bank account. One afternoon, about a year after the wedding, my phone rang with an unfamiliar number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. Catherine? This is Richard Morrison. I paused. Hello, Richard. I'm calling because I wanted to invite you to lunch. Just you and me. No agenda. No apologies. Just a conversation. Would you be willing? Why?
Because I've spent the last year thinking about what you said, about how we've measured people, about our prejudices, about our behavior. And I want to talk to someone who saw through all my bullshit and called me on it. That's unusually honest of you. I'm trying to be more honest. Turns out it's harder than I thought. I agreed to lunch. We met at a diner, not an expensive restaurant. His choice, which surprised me. He arrived in jeans and a casual shirt. Also surprising. I'm selling the company, he said after we ordered. Retiring early. Charlene and I are downsizing. We're moving to a smaller house. Why? Because we realized we were drowning in stuff, in image, in the constant performance of wealth. It was exhausting. And after that brunch, after watching you demolish our worldview with a bank statement and some hard truths, we started questioning everything. And we discovered we weren't happy. We were rich, we were successful, we had everything we thought we wanted, but we weren't happy. We didn't have real friends. We didn't have genuine connections. We had transactions, people who wanted things from us or wanted to be seen with us, but no one who actually gave a damn about us as people. That must have been a difficult realization. Devastating, but necessary. He paused. Catherine, I need to really apologize. Not because I want forgiveness, not because I'm trying to make myself feel better, but because you deserve to hear it. What we did that day was inexcusable. We treated you like garbage. We tried to buy you off, we insulted you, dismissed you, and made assumptions based on our own prejudices. There's no excuse for it, and I'm sorry. I looked at this man who'd sat across from me a year ago, oozing entitlement and condescension. He looked different now, tired but genuine, humbled but not broken. I appreciate that, I said. Real apologies are rare. Can I ask you something? Go ahead. Why did you do it? Why did you let us believe you were poor? You could have just told us the truth from the beginning. Because the truth wouldn't have revealed who you really were. If I'd walked into that restaurant in designer clothes, talking about my corporate position, you would have treated me completely differently. You would have been charming and respectful and interested, and I would have never known what you really thought about people you perceived as beneath you. So, it was a test. It was an observation. I gave you enough rope, and you showed me exactly who you were. That's valuable information for a mother whose daughter is marrying into your family. Did we pass? Eventually. Not that day, but over this past year, watching you volunteer, watching you try to change, watching you question your own assumptions, that's passing. Slowly. With effort. Richard smiled sadly. I'm 63 years old, and I'm just now learning how to be a decent human being. That's embarrassing. It's never too late to learn. Most people never even try. We talked for 2 hours about his childhood, about how poverty had scarred him, about how he'd spent his entire adult life running from that fear, about how wealth had become his armor, his identity, his entire sense of self-worth. When you pulled out that card, when you showed us your account balance, I felt like my entire world was collapsing, because if you could be that wealthy and live that simply, it meant everything I believed was wrong. It meant I'd wasted decades chasing the wrong things.
You chased security. That's not wrong. You just confused security with superiority. That's exactly it. I thought being rich made me better, smarter, more valuable. And you showed me it didn't. Money is a tool, Richard. Nothing more. It can be used well or poorly, but it's not virtuous or evil on its own. That's determined by the person wielding it. When we parted ways, he hugged me. Awkwardly, unpracticed, but genuine. "Thank you," he said, "for being honest even when it was brutal. We needed it." "You're welcome." Over the next few years, I watched Daniel's parents slowly transform. Not completely, old habits die hard, but they became more aware, more considerate, more humble. They still had money, but it no longer defined them. They still lived comfortably, but they'd stopped performing wealth. Rebecca got pregnant 2 years after the wedding. When she told me, she cried with joy and terror in equal measure. "What if I mess this up? What if I can't do what you did? Raise a good person despite everything?" "You will," I assured her, "because you've learned what matters, and you won't make the mistakes I made." "What mistakes? You did everything right." "I kept too many secrets. I protected you from things you could have handled. I underestimated your ability to understand complexity." Don't do that with your child. Be honest. Age-appropriately honest, but honest. Will you tell them about your money? About who you really are? From the beginning. They'll grow up knowing their grandmother is both a woman who clips coupons and a woman who runs a corporation. They'll understand that both things are true, that neither contradicts the other. My granddaughter, Claire, was born on a Tuesday in September. I held her in the hospital, this tiny, perfect person, and made her a silent promise. I would teach her about money without letting money define her. I would show her wealth without creating entitlement. I would give her every advantage while teaching her that advantages are meant to be shared. When Claire was 2, Rebecca and Daniel asked to meet with me. They sat at my kitchen table, looking nervous. "Mom, we want to talk about the future, about inheritance, about Claire, and about how we handle all of this." "I'm listening." "We don't want Claire to grow up entitled. We don't want her to know she's going to inherit a fortune someday. But we also want to be honest with her. We're trying to figure out the balance. Here's what I'd suggest. Tell her the truth in stages. When she's young, she knows Grandma works hard at an important job. When she's older, she understands Grandma makes good money. When she's a teenager, she learns about investments and financial responsibility. And when she's an adult, she understands the full scope and her future responsibilities. That makes sense. Gradual honesty. Exactly. And in the meantime, you raise her with values. You teach her to work. You don't buy her everything she wants. You make her earn money, save money, give money away. You teach her that wealth is a responsibility, not a reward. "Will you help us?" Rebecca asked. "Will you teach her what you taught me?" "Of course. But Rebecca, you already know how. You've been watching me your whole life. You just didn't know what you were watching." Claire is 5 now. She comes to my house every week for what we call Grandma Days. We bake cookies, we read books, we work in the garden, and sometimes when she asks questions, I teach her little lessons. "Grandma, why don't you have a big TV like Mama and Daddy?" "Because this one works fine. When something works, we don't need to replace it just because something newer exists." "But don't you want a big one?" "Not really. I'd rather spend my money on things that matter more." "Like what?" "Like books for kids who don't have any. Like food for people who are hungry. Like helping people go to college when they can't afford it." "You do that?" "I try to." "That's nice, Grandma." These small conversations plant seeds. Seeds of consciousness. Seeds of values.
seeds of understanding that wealth carries responsibility. Last month, Rebecca called me in tears. "Mom, something happened at Claire's preschool." My heart clenched. "What? Is she okay?"
She's fine, but there's a little boy in her class, Tommy. His family is struggling. They were about to lose their apartment, and somehow an anonymous donation paid their rent for 6 months. Mom, was that you? Rebecca, anonymous means anonymous. Mom. Claire mentioned Tommy. She said he was sad because they might have to move away. She said he was her friend. What would you have had me do? Rebecca laughed through tears. Exactly what you did. God, you're impossible. I'm consistent. Claire asked me today if we could help Tommy's family. She wanted to use her piggy bank money. She has $12. What did you say? I said that was very generous and kind, and that sometimes grown-ups have ways to help that are bigger than piggy bank money, and that the most important thing was that she saw someone struggling and wanted to help. Perfect answer. I'm learning from the best. I'm 61 now. I'm thinking about retirement, about succession planning, about what comes next. My CEO has been pushing me to stay, offering more money, more benefits, more everything. But I'm tired. Not of working, of performing, of the corporate game, of the politics. I want to spend more time with Claire, with Rebecca. Maybe travel, not to expensive resorts, but to places that matter. Maybe volunteer more. Maybe just be. Last week, I submitted my retirement letter, effective in 6 months. The board tried to convince me to reconsider. They offered me a position as senior advisor, a generous consulting fee, the works. Thank you, I said. But no, it's time. Catherine, you're leaving so much money on the table. I have enough money, more than enough. What I don't have enough of is time, and I can't buy more of that. When I told Rebecca, she cried. You're really retiring? I am. What will you do? Live, finally, fully. I've spent 40 years building wealth. Now I want to spend time enjoying the things wealth can't buy. Like what? Like mornings with my granddaughter, like afternoons reading books I've been meaning to get to, like volunteering at the library, like teaching financial literacy at the community college, like finally learning to paint, like just being, without the constant pressure of doing. You've earned it. We've all earned it. The right to just be human, without the performance, without the pressure, without the need to prove anything to anyone. Yesterday, I took Claire to the park. We fed the ducks, played on the swings, and ate ice cream cones that dripped down our hands. She talked nonstop about her friends, her teachers, her ideas about how the world works. Grandma, are you rich? Why do you ask? Because Daddy said you have an important job, and Mama said you're very smart with money. Do you think I'm rich? She thought about it seriously. I don't know. You don't have fancy stuff, but you have a lot of books, and you always have cookies, and you help people. So maybe? What do you think rich means? Having lots of money? That's one kind of rich, but there are other kinds. You can be rich in love, rich in friends, rich in time, rich in experiences, rich in things that matter. Which kind are you? I hope I'm rich in all the ways that count. She nodded, satisfied with this answer, and went back to feeding the ducks. As I watched her, I thought about the journey, about the scared young single mother I'd been, about the corporate warrior I'd become, about the grandmother I was now, about all the versions of myself I'd inhabited, all equally true, all equally valid. I thought about Charlene and Richard, who judged me so quickly and learned so slowly. About Rebecca, who'd worried about me unnecessarily but learned valuable lessons from that worry. About Daniel, who stood by my daughter when it mattered. About Claire, who's growing up with a very different understanding of wealth than any of us had. And I thought about that brunch, that pivotal moment when I'd let them see their own prejudices reflected back. It hadn't been kind, it hadn't been gentle, but it had been necessary. Sometimes truth requires a mirror, not a soft explanation. My phone buzzed. A text from my CEO. "Last chance to reconsider. We need you." I typed back, "No, you don't. You'll be fine. Trust the people you trained. Let the next generation lead." Another text, this time from Rebecca. "Dinner this weekend? Daniel's grilling. Claire insists you make your famous potato salad. Wouldn't miss it." This is wealth, I thought. These moments, these connections, these simple, ordinary, extraordinary days. Not the board meetings or the million-dollar deals or the investment portfolios. Those were just tools. The life they enabled, this was the treasure. Claire ran back to me, her hands covered in duck food and joy. "Grandma, can we come back next week?" "Absolutely. And every week forever?" "As many weeks as we can." "Good, because this is my favorite thing." "Mine too, sweetheart. Mine too." We walked home as the sun set, holding hands, talking about nothing and everything. And I realized that all my years of hiding, of living small while building big, of keeping secrets and maintaining facades, had led to this moment. This honest, simple, perfect moment. I'd been right to live the way I did. Right to teach through example rather than explanation. Right to let my daughter struggle and grow and discover. Right to test Daniel's parents and force them to confront themselves. Right to build wealth quietly and use it purposefully. But I'd also been wrong. Wrong to keep so many secrets. Wrong to let Rebecca worry unnecessarily. Wrong to think that protecting her from knowledge was the same as protecting her from harm. The truth, as always, was complicated. Parenting was complicated. Wealth was complicated. Life was complicated. But love was simple. And in the end, that was the only investment that truly mattered. The only currency with lasting value. The only wealth worth building. That night, after Claire was in bed and Rebecca and Daniel had left, I sat in my simple living room and looked around. At the worn furniture and faded curtains, at the stack of library books and the half-finished crossword puzzle, at the photographs on the wall showing a life well lived, if quietly so. Tomorrow I would go to work, make decisions, lead meetings, do the job I'd done for decades. But in 6 months, I would walk away from the all, and I would do it without regret, without looking back, without needing anyone to acknowledge what I'd built or achieved. Because I'd already received the only recognition that mattered. My daughter's respect, my granddaughter's love, my own peace of mind. Everything else was just numbers on a screen. And numbers, I'd learned long ago, told you nothing about what really counted. The end. What did you think of this story? Which character did you relate to the most? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story, please consider supporting the channel. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you in the next story.